This time, Barcelona, 84-87, the making of the El Tel legend.
No, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. Because I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest football team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case for Oxford United, and joining us, our king of the data, as ever, it's Jamie Rooney.
Good evening, Graham. Kind of feel super excited about this because some of the very small feedback I've received, because you won't be surprised to hear, as you know fully well, any opportunity I get to talk about this football podcast that we put together, I take. And through my little travels, when people ask me, "Oh, what do you do?" and I can't help but gravitate to say, "Oh yeah, I kind of co-host this football podcast." And and they're like, "Do you do any kind of big teams?" And I said, "Well, we're doing Barcelona." And they were like, "Oh wow, Pep's Barcelona." No. Cruyff's Barcelona. No. When Cruyff played for Barcelona. No. Which one are you doing? Terry Venables Barcelona? Terry Venables? He was at Barcelona.
You know, I feel it's like little baby steps towards getting to the good teams, but I'm not quite ready to go to the great teams yet. So we'll get there. We'll get there one day. I mean, the Arsenal Invincibles, it's definitely coming, but at the moment, it feels a bit like the was it the Zabruga file in Moonlighting, where they were constantly I can't remember what that case was. There's always a case they were they were trying to get the. Our guest is chuckling away at this as he kind of remembers this on Moonlighting. There was always. Have we made any progress on the McKillicuddy file or Zagruda file? And it's just a running joke throughout the entire thing. They never got to it, I don't think, as far as I know. Yeah. So joining us this week, and we're extending him from his South Coast remit. It's South Coast Jamie. Hi, Jamie.
Good evening. It's lovely to be here. And we could have gone down a rabbit hole with the Moonlighting thing. They're one of my favourite ever programmes. That you're absolutely right. There was the standing joke of the case that was never really solved. Yeah, let's not. I won't go there. But no, great to be here. Talking about a former Portsmouth chairman, of course, Terry Venables,
and of course is what he's known across the game globally for. If you viewed it sort of through history, and this is, Jamie, the point you were kind of making, is that you would kind of imagine Terry Venables in charge of Barcelona is like one of the greatest managers in charge of one of the greatest clubs. But in reality, this appointment is the manager of QPR taking over a team that's not won the title for 10 years. So there's some sort of strange bits about it. And what would be quite useful would be to work out, I mean, where are they in Barcelona's journey at this point? Barcelona had been successful, hadn't they?
Yeah, Barcelona have won lots of La Ligas and had won a bunch of them up until Venables took over in the mid-1980s. I don't know if you know this, Graham, but Barcelona, 6 of their first 7 managers were all English. And a lot of those that managed Barcelona in the early years were related to, either via a player or a secretary, in the case of Miles Barron, the West Auckland team that travelled the world and won the Sir Thomas Lipton Trophy, aka the Club World Cup, the first ever World Cup.
First World Cup. So their origins are connected to that side.
You could argue that there's definitely the linkage that goes all the way back. It was a Catalonian, a Swiss banker, and some English people that set the team up. They started playing in the Catalonian Championship. La Liga didn't exist until 1928-29, and Barcelona won the first ever La Liga, and they were managed by a fellow called James Bellamy. And James Bellamy, a former Portsmouth player, was English. So the very first manager to win a La Liga title was an Englishman managing Barcelona.
There's some pedigree here or some history of British managers weaving their magic at Barca. sort of across this period, they are one of Spain's more successful clubs.
Yeah, they're massively successful. I mean, it really is Barcelona and Real Madrid, Atletico Bilbao, Athletic Club, and also Atletico Madrid. But in the 1950s and 60s, we know that Real Madrid dominated. They dominated in Europe and they dominated in Spain. And Barcelona had a bit of a barren spell. They only picked up a single championship in the 1970s. So when Terry Venables arrives at Barcelona in 1984, Barcelona haven't won a league title for 11 years, which in the history of La Liga is a pretty big deal. I think they've only gone longer than that once, and that was a 12-year spell in the 1950s and 60s.
So a big club, decent record, up there competing, but not anywhere near the kind of domination that we've probably come to suspect or get used to over these last couple of decades or so. Now, Terry Venables, I guess he made his name as a manager at least. I mean, it is interesting when you think about him getting the job, because he made his name as a manager at Crystal Palace, you know, the team of the 80s, of course, as they were known, the second division team that got promoted to the top league, and then at QPR, who, again, a second-tier team who gets promoted, he gets to Wembley and finish right. But it's not like Terry Venables is managing like any of England's best clubs.
No, he's not. I mean, QPR definitely weren't one of England's best clubs. They were doing okay in the top league. Yeah, I mean, it is really a strange decision. But I think the decision came because there were recommendations that came from people that were well respected in the game, one of them being Bobby Robson. The Venables was a manager on the up. He was one to watch, and it could be in the best interest of Barcelona to take him now when his profile isn't as glorious as it potentially could become.
Those early years of Venables, and I think we are going to go back at some point and do Crystal Palace, the team of the 80s, which I think has Vince Hilaire there for you, Jamie.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember poaching him from, I think we poached him from Palace.
And of course, the famous for his appearance in the song, is it The Beloved, or who did the song?
Yeah, they name check him, don't they? They absolutely do. I've got a side story on Vince Hilaire, but it's probably not worth value. But I have seen Vince Hilaire in pubs in Portsmouth, and he does a few DJ sets here and there. Yeah. So next time you're down this way, I'll take you along. I know the pubs he frequents doing his DJ set.
I don't think this is going to be the last time we reference footballers with musical links.
This is where I add some value, Jamie, later on.
Without going too deeply into the Crystal Palace, one thing I did say, I don't know if you guys picked this up, when he was at Crystal Palace, they were really struggling for money. So they had, I think Peter Taylor was their star player, sold to Spurs, and they made some money. But I'm reading, and I can only assume this is correct, that that Crystal Palace were able to rustle up 1,500 quid to sign Rashid Harkouk from Feltham. He goes on to play for them for a while, with Terry Venables paying half of the funds himself. But this is on the understanding that he would receive 50% of any future transfer fee. Given some of the dealings, it doesn't sound the least likely thing that Terry Venables would have agreed to.
No, not so.
As you say, he gets QPR, he gets both of those sides promoted, and famously gets QPR to the FA Cup final, but and actually leads them to, I think, the top 6 in the top division. But it is a bit of a left field choice when he comes in to take Barcelona, who whilst Barcelona aren't the most successful side of the previous 10 years, it's not been for the want of trying, and it's not been for the want of stars, because, Jamie, they've got one or two players there, haven't they?
In the ranks of Barcelona, you've got a tidy player called Diego Maradona. Now, his time in Spain is short, and his time in Spain is up and down. He gets, it's not really an injury. I think he got like hepatitis or something like that. So he was out for a while. So he's hot and cold. Then he comes back into the side and is on the receiving end of a very vicious tackle from Goycochea, the butcher of Bilbao, I think he was called, nicknamed. Who also did a tidy job on Bernd Schuster as well, who was in this particular Barcelona team with Maradona. And that puts him out for, it should be around about 6 to 9 months, but Maradona's back within 4 months. Incredible recovery. He goes off to Argentina and comes back way ahead of schedule in terms of his recovery. But he's not forgotten about Bilbao. And in a very heated match, Maradona takes license at the end and starts kung fu kicking and kneeing all manner of players and coaching staff in the head. One of them was knocked unconscious as well. So Maradona, uncharacteristically, is a troubled character. But all this is happening, the Maradona stuff is happening, whether he really will stay or will he go, when they're looking to replace Menotti. And ironically, Menotti, I think he said to the Barcelona board, it's either Maradona or me. So I think the board pushed the exit for Maradona, and they get a pretty tidy sum, a world record fee for Maradona from Napoli. And we know what happens there because we've covered that story. And ironically, Menotti goes as well. And it creates an opportunity. And that brings us back to our man, Terry Venables.
You mentioned Bernd Schuster, and we're going to dive into Bernd Schuster in a little bit on that. But his role in that cup final is even more glorious than Maradona, I think.
It's a brilliant. I mean, we shouldn't condone fighting and football, but it's an insane, brilliant watch, isn't it? If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. It's better than a Bruce Lee film, isn't it? They are absolutely going for it. When the first time I ever saw that, I was just utterly stunned.
Yeah, I mean, there's no outbreak of football at all. There's no sign of a football game in there at all.
Just when it kicks off, it just goes. It's like a barroom brawl, isn't it? It's just, brilliant. Yeah, and didn't I read as well that Maradona, he sort of, when he's injured, doesn't he sort of get 16 of his friends and family over from Argentina as around? They're all around his house, and he just, what you find out about Maradona's later ways that he liked to party, you wonder what that may have been another reason why they wanted to move him on. There was probably some rumblings. I mean, he had an entourage of about 16 people who lived in his house and he would pay for everything, wouldn't he, as well? I mean, on the one hand, you could think huge generosity and what a lovely fella. And on the other hand, like, I'm not sure I need this in my football club if we're going to try and win things. Mind you, he is the best player in the world. You're always juggling that, aren't you? But yeah, great character.
Yeah, he burnt the candle at both ends incredibly well, incredibly successfully. And also, when he was at Barcelona, he got Menotti to change the training time to be in the evening. And Menotti, I think, said it replicates when we're playing games. Why wouldn't we want to train at the same time we're playing games? I think it turned out later down the line that Menotti changed it because Maradona said, I just want more time in bed. I can't get to training in time because I'm staying out too late, enjoying myself in this beautiful city.
Venables arrives, but the decision has already been made to sell Maradona, from what I can tell. And the owner of Barcelona at the time has got designs on a replacement, hasn't he, Jamie?
Yeah, he does. And he's identified Hugo Sanchez, the Mexican, who lights up the 1986 World Cup, an absolute fantastic player. And I think they want to get in there before Real Madrid make a move as well. There's a kind of history between Real Madrid and Barcelona and players. And we know that actually did that with Real Madrid, the 1950 team. But yeah, so Venables comes in, and Venables himself isn't keen on Sanchez. He's got ideas of his own, and he wants to bring in Steve Archibald, the great Tottenham and Scotland striker, to replace Diego Maradona.
It's not an obvious like-for-like swap. I mean, my memory of Archibald was that he was a goal scorer, that he was a proper kind of number 9. Maradona was sort of absolutely everything. But Archibald, he'd been successful everywhere he went. But I think, Venables wins the battle, doesn't he? And he signs Archibald, and that's the signing is commonly regarded as Steve Who, isn't it?
That's it, isn't it? It's funny though, isn't it? As you say, because from the outside you're looking at Maradona being replaced by Steve Archibald, and it doesn't seem a like for like kind of comparison. And Steve Archibald was a great player. I remember, being a kid and seeing him playing for Spurs, as you say. But what was interesting, wasn't it? I mean, I think Venables made the point that what Archibald, he was obviously trying to change the style of the team, but what Archibald gave you was a finisher. And doesn't he score 15 goals that season? So he kind of absolutely repays that faith. But he also says he's a very unselfish player. I think that's Venables himself is quoted as saying that. And of course, if you want somebody to knit the team, hold the ball up, knit it, finish, and he thinks that he's got good enough players coming through the ranks already within the team that might, because you know what it's like as well when you've got an absolute star player in a team. Sometimes it can the others are just hod carriers for them, aren't they? And they don't get a chance to flourish. So maybe again Venables' skill, it was kind of forced upon him, as you say, Jamie. He was, I think, day one, isn't it? He turns up and they basically say Maradona's going. We want Hugo Sanchez, and he fights to get Archibald in and gets his way in the end.
I really like Steve Archibald. I think he was a real slick player. I mean, I only remember from childhood, but he had a great time at Tottenham. And I think one of the reasons why I liked him as well is down to aesthetics. Just the way he wore his kit with the shirt hanging out, almost covering his short shorts. I mean, he just, the socks rolled down to his ankles. He just looked every bit worth what he was doing on the football pitch. And I think Barcelona paid about £1 million for him, 1.1 million. So, 1984, that's quite a lot of money.
I think another reason that it's a bit of a gamble is that British players playing abroad have not been university successful, or maybe just haven't been university. I was going to do some research on this, and then I thought, no, all I'm going to do is I think I can remember the 10 players who played abroad. I don't think it was more complicated than that. I remember even a Portsmouth player playing abroad. Mark Haley did well in Italy, and Kevin Keegan and Tony Woodcock and Dave Watson in Germany. But I mean, that really only a very small number of players, British players, actually played abroad at this stage.
Yeah, but there was a few that went at this particular moment as well in the 1980s, and we've covered this before because English football clubs being denied European football, players had to go outside the English league in order to find it. But there's a few actually. It's a handful. Obviously, the very famous one is Laurie Cunningham, the former West Brom player. He was at Real Madrid early on and well liked and well respected as well. Later in the 1980s, I don't know if you remember this, Sammy Lee and Michael Robinson, who were both Liverpool players, went out to, I think it was Osasuna.
Osasuna?
Yeah, that's right.
And Michael Robinson never came back. He was like he's like a fluent Spanish speaks slick.
Yes.
The Mark Nicholas of Spanish TV, isn't he?
Yeah,
I'm sure he'd love that reference.
Who wouldn't want to be the Mark Nicholas?
Yeah, he made a TV career in Spain as well. So not only was he a player, he became a TV man as well.
Yeah, rather like, famously, of course, I know you're all thinking about it, Robbie Mustoe, the former Oxford United midfielder who went to become a big TV name in the States.
Wow, there you go.
There we have it. Is that done now?
I was expecting a big reaction to that. For some reason, that wasn't.
I thought
used.
As soon as you brought in English players that have played abroad, you were just setting yourself up for John Aldrich.
Yeah, no,
that's right. That's where my money was on, Jamie.
Yeah,
Robbie Mustoe was completely went under the radar there for me. I mean, in some ways, respect. I mean, it was John Aldridge all the way. I had my mortgage on it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Wow, what a shocker! Well played, Graham.
Yeah, thank you. I'm pleased with that. So yes, I think Archibald is a punt, given the supposed problems. Because whilst English players have played, there are a few of them have played abroad. Some have been successful, and obviously, John Charles is one of the most successful pulls of all time, really. In that, I'm not sure the track record is that great. I suppose the ones that do make it are sort of strikers, although typically slightly more. I mean, like I say, Mark Haley, I think, was quite successful.
He was
there in the John Charles mould as a big target man, which is in Italy, Italian football, they always have a fair bit of.
I mean, he did. He went on and had a great career, didn't he? what always I remember about the transfer to AC Milan was that we were supposed to get a game against AC Milan as part of the deal that he went over there for about, I think he went for about £1 million or something. That never happened. Yeah, it was. But yeah, no, he had a great career, and he wasn't with Portsmouth for very long actually until he got sort of poached out there. I think, and he played a season for us in a very average side.
Well, that bit I can believe.
As is often the way, yeah.
But so, Jamie, the any other notable Brits abroad that we should be thinking of?
Well, I mean, just focusing in the Spanish league, I mean, there's not many that have played, but there were a few players that I've never heard of, actually. There's a player called, when I was doing the research, called Raphael Mead, who in the 1980s...
Arsenal. He was ex-Arsenal.
Yeah, that's it. I knew I could rely on you, Graham. Yeah, he was an Arsenal striker, and he did well in Portugal. And there was another one called Harry Lowe, who was a centre-half. He played for Brighton and Tottenham. And he was, I think, the first player to move from England to Spain in 1935, and he played for Real Sociedad. So the history hasn't got a lot of depth in terms of players that have moved from the English league to the Spanish La Liga, but it does go back quite some time.
So I guess what helps Venables in his period as Barcelona manager is actually that it starts exceptionally well, doesn't it? So winning 3-0 at Real Madrid is not a bad start, is it?
It's one of those, isn't it? If you're under pressure and you can win your first game and you can win it against your closest, most hated rivals, it gets you a bit of breathing space, doesn't it? And he does exactly that. But what I found interesting actually reading about it, because Venables, I think this is what Venables is very good at actually in his managerial career. He changes the culture of places, doesn't it? His natural charm, his personability, his footballing brain. But what he does, I heard that there was a real downcast, dour feel about Barcelona at the time. They were always deemed to be unlucky, the victims. And Venables got quite excited about the fact that the first game was going to be away at Real Madrid, and he was kind of gung ho about it. And upbeat about it, and of course, and then he, as you say, wins it 3-0, and I think that just gives a huge. Suddenly, you've got everybody on board. Then, haven't you? You've got a real chance, and Steve Archibald becomes a bit of a fan's favourite, doesn't he? And he turns the crowd in his favour. So, no, he, as you say, couldn't have got off to a better start.
And actually, that season goes remarkably well, Jamie, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a sensational start, and absolutely, Steve from Jamie is exactly it, because all of the stuff that would have been concerned about in the summer is washed away in the first 5 games, where they get off to a blistering 5 wins out of 5. They go top of La Liga, and they don't move from that position for the whole of the season. They amass such a lead that the championships becomes a foregone conclusion at a pretty early stage that Barcelona are going to win this thing.
I think at that stage, could you only have a couple of overseas players? Is that all gone by then?
It's in Spain, it chops and changes. There's a period of time in Spain where you weren't allowed any foreign players at all, any non-nationals. Then there was rules where you could have non-nationals, but La Liga would have had its own rules in terms of who would have been available for matches. But they didn't have a massive foreign contingent in that particular season. The very first season, they've got Steve Archibald, who we talked about, and they've got Bernd Schuster, and also a player called Miguel Retorto. I don't know. I don't think he made many appearances for Barcelona. It's really just the two, Archibald and Schuster, are the two non-nationals in that particular Barcelona team.
And Schuster is probably. He was a star at that stage, wasn't he?
When has he not been a star? Absolutely fantastic player with an incredible attitude to things as well, as I'm sure you know, Graham.
And we're all going to come on to his appearance, petulance drop in the European Cup final in a little bit. But I think what's interesting at this stage is that actually because Schuster has almost 2 different careers, doesn't he? Where he begins as quite an attacking player. That's how I kind of remember him. I think I remember him from the 1982 World Cup, where Schuster was the progressive player, was essentially almost like a number 10, and by the end of his career, he's like just sat as almost like a holding midfielder, distributing the ball, isn't he? But actually, in those early years, his goal return at Barcelona is excellent over the years.
Yeah, he gets clobbered, doesn't he? That's part of the problem. He gets a serious injury, and he's out pretty much for a season, I think, and he loses some pace, and so he starts to migrate, towards the back, and as you say, plays that sort of sweeper libero role, doesn't he? And doesn't get the goals, but as you say, the goal return in under Venables actually is quite remarkable, isn't it? I mean, he really double figures for two seasons in a row.
I think this is peak Schuster as well. I mean, this is really him. I mean, 442 a few years ago ran up kind of one of their articles of the 50 greatest players to play for Barcelona, and there's only 2 players in that 50 that are in this particular Terry Venables squad. One of them is Bert Schuster, and he's in the low 40s. The other one is Gary Lineker. But he is one of those players that I think would have won the admiration of many around him. And it's just the timing that he's in a team that is very good, as we're discussing. But obviously there were better Barcelona teams to follow. But Schuster he had everything. He was box to box. He was very creative. He had pace. He could hit the ball hard. Could take 3 kicks. He read the game incredibly well. Wonderful technique. He was just,
he had
one
amazing
of those
hair.
Yeah, the blonde angel. The blonde angel, I think he was nicknamed because of his long blonde hair. Yeah,
Don't underestimate the hair. It was fantastic.
We've often called you that ourselves, haven't we, Graham? The ginger angel.
Ginger angel, indeed.
He's a great character, though, isn't he? He's when you look at some of his history, because he retires from the West Germany national team, doesn't it? Only 24, because he has a petulant strop with the management there, and this is a recurring theme in his career, by the way.
Yeah.
Due to some scheduling of a Brazil friendly between Barcelona and he falls out with everybody about it. But a crying shame. And there's also there was a national uproar as well, wasn't it? During the 1980 Euros, he walks out of playing against Albania because of the birth of his son. Respect to him for that, but I've got to be honest.
History probably looks quite kindly at that now.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if I'm playing for England. My kid's being born. I'm stepping away from a Euros game. So I think that says more credit to Burns rather than me there.
Schuster, what I admire, and again, it's part of his desire generally to sort of troll everyone he's involved with in some ways. Of course, when he leaves Barcelona, he leaves to Real Madrid, which is
yes, exactly.
There's lots of teams he could have joined.
Yeah. There's a lot to like about Schuster. There really is.
So the season actually continues now. Not obviously it continues, but the season continues remarkably well for Barcelona, and they're sort of credited with playing this sort of pressing game, isn't it? I mean, that seems to be that kind of. I haven't kind of watched too much of it back, but that does seem to be one of the things that Venables is credited with having brought tactically to Barca.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, as well? Because of course, Pep Guardiola is sort of ball boy at this time as well, isn't he? During this period, and he is quoted as saying, "I read a lovely thing that he would have burnt Schuster in his five-a-side, in his all-time five-a-side team." And there's a picture of Guardiola sort of hanging on to Schuster's shirt when they win the semi-final in the European Cup as well. So it's really interesting, isn't it? I remember watching Pep's sides amazed at the pressing that they did in his time there as well. And of course, he's there as an impressionable kid watching Venables start that ball rolling. And a lot of people say that this is when Barcelona's culture of high pressing began, was with Venables, which is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in it as well. Johan Cruyff definitely comes later down the line and takes it to another level, and he also sets up the youth academy, which Barcelona benefit from massively. But yeah, Venables is an influence. He really is. The English have, it's interesting when you look at the history of football. Sometimes the English themselves can be a bit down on England's tactical nous in football, but you can go all the way back to the late 1960s and 70s. There was a manager, Vic Buckingham, who managed Barcelona for a couple of years, and he's credited, if we're really tracing the roots back, he's credited with the idea of total football, because he managed Ajax and also managed Barcelona, and he gave Johan Cruyff his debut for Ajax, and Rinus Michels was familiar with Buckingham. So, and Greg, just in case you're curious, not related to Des,
I see
I'm
there's
afraid.
a connection. That's a connection.
You've taken the Oxford United reference, so I can't even use it anyway. So, so Vic Buckingham, also a big influence on the history of the game. Do many people know about Vic Buckingham? Jimmy Hogan. These are big influences on the game, and Terry Venables is kind of leading on from that. He's an Englishman that's gone abroad. He's playing a pressing style, and that has an impression on a young Pep Guardiola, who's going to be using that particular style of play to win all and sundry.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's a very fair point. You know, people like Vic Buckingham and Jimmy Hogan, I mean, there'll be lots of people who don't know who they are. I mean, clearly, possibly two people in this podcast. Jamie, I don't want to be speaking to you. I mean, you may know them.
No, I'm one of the two people you mentioned, Graham, that's for sure. No, I'm not going to try and hide behind any fancy facade here. I have no idea, but fair play to them.
So it does end remarkably well, and so Barcelona win that title, win the league, and actually they win it relatively comfortably, don't they?
Don't they win it with about 4 weeks to go? I think, and about 11 points clear, I think, of second place, if my memory serves me right. And of course, these were the days. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Jamie, but wasn't it 2 points for a win here as well? So I mean, it was quite a good old spanking they've given to the opposition here to do that.
Yeah, it's an 18-team league. It's a 34-game season, and Barcelona wrapped it up with, as you say, Jamie, like 4 games to go. 10 points ahead of Atletico Madrid in second place. Only 2 defeats, a win ratio of 61.5%, 61.5%. So it's a glorious first season for Terry Venables in the league. Doesn't do so well in the Cup Winners' Cup. They go out of that at the first hurdle, and they only get to the quarterfinals of the Copa del Rey. But from a league perspective, Venables is already part way to having a statue built outside the Nou Camp.
And that is their first title win for 11 years. And they hadn't actually won a huge number of titles prior to that, had they?
I think that's their 9th, actually.
They had won quite a few titles before that as well, so they're back on a good track, aren't they? That is their 9th win.
It's their 9th championship.
Yeah. I thought it might be their 9th.
It's all about the details.
Also, with their 9th championship. So, no, but it is their first for over 10 years, and they are on a proper high. And in the second half, we are going to see how much higher Terry Venables can take them. Hi, Graham here. We're just about wrapping up our plans for this current season, but we're already turning our attentions to our next season. If you've been listening, there are some teams you would like us to cover, or would even like to come on and talk about those teams, you can contact us, drop us a line. How do they get hold of us, Jamie?
Well, they can get hold of us by using the social media accounts, X or Blue Sky, where we have the same handles. We've got yourself at Said and Dunn, and myself, Couch Pundito. So Couch Pundito at Blue Sky, and Said and Dunn at Blue Sky, or on the X, aka Twitter equivalent.
Excellent. And you can also get hold of us on Insta, which I think the kids call it these days. What's our handle on that one?
Yes, we're on Instagram where we're trying to share some of our little videos. So please give us a like, a follow. So we are on Instagram as the Greatest Team Football Podcast, or by far the Greatest Team Football Podcast. Search for either of those and you'll find us. Please follow.
So welcome back. We're talking about Barcelona and we're talking about Terry Venables and we're talking, what do you want to go and make those eyes at me for? Terry Venables. So I think that might be his first musical recording. He releases that as a single in 1974 whilst a QPR player. That's a fabulous picture of Terry Venables appearing on the Russell Harty show, which is another great reference in the past, singing that song live on the telly, and much to the bemusement of the rest of the QPR squad he's with. And they do look a bit puzzled. Phil Parks, Jerry Francis, who at this stage looks as though he could be in the Kinks, because his hair at that stage is fantastically Ray or Dave Davis. But music is very much in Terry Venables' blood, isn't it, Jamie?
He's a crooner. I think he's always fancied himself as a bit of a lounge singer. He definitely likes to do the big numbers. He did I think it was a England World Cup promotion with the Sun singing If I Can Dream, the wonderful tune. And Venables does a fairly good job of it, in fairness. You kind of want to pick fault, but it's not too bad. But yeah, he sang on live Spanish TV with a big band behind him, and he did a Frank Sinatra number. I've got you under my skin. But you really want it to be bad, but I don't know. It don't sound too bad when you compare him and stack him up against other footballers that have tried their hand at music.
No, he's good, actually. You have to say it. And I think that's part of his appeal, isn't it? He's able to. He doesn't take himself too seriously, Venables, and I think that just enables him to, get players on side as well as fans, isn't it? And I think that's one of his great charms. And as you say, Jamie, he's actually, what also helps is he's not terrible at it, is he? And he's just able to lighten the mood a little bit here and there. And as I say, it's all part of his character, which is good. But as I say, I for my sins, I took a bit of a rabbit hole on this. When I saw Venables singing, I decided to, rather than go the Diamond Lights angle of footballers, I went managers.
So you've really gone for deep cuts.
I've got deep cuts, B-sides, and
collectibles.
And of course, the name that sprung to mind was Ron Atkinson. He always used to like a bit of a song, didn't he? So,
a picture of him. No, that's Kramer. But behind me on towards left, you can just see Ron Atkinson there in his oxygen, the tank.
There you go. So I went and had a look for if there was any Ron Atkinson stuff on YouTube, and of course there was. And unfortunately for dear old Ron, similar in many ways to Terry Venables in the sense that he didn't take himself too seriously, but was a great man manager. But I did find the song by Big Ron Atkinson. It's called Big Ron Atkinson. It's Christmas, Let's Give Love a Try. And for anybody who hasn't heard this song, I highly recommend that you find it on YouTube, because it's truly, truly awful. And you start listening to it and wondering why this isn't played every Christmas alongside Wham and Slade. And after about 10 seconds, you realise why it's not played in the same sense. Wouldn't the world be a better place if Ron Atkinson was, you had him crooning at the same time as you had Last Christmas and Slade? That'd be perfect. The terrible thing is, and I know I'm going off on a massive tangent here, and forgive me this, and I'll end very quickly, but I then went further to see what else Ron Atkinson had done. And of course, I found a clip of him singing New York, New York at former Peterborough goalkeeper's Mark Tyler's testimonial dinner. And trust me, it's out there. And it's awful.
Ron Atkinson must have done. I'm sure I saw him do but I might just have imagined it. Must have done a version of Big Spender at the point he broke the British transfer record. I sort of think that happened, but I've done a very quick Google search and I can't find any actual evidence. In my mind, that should kind of happen. He breaks the transfer record. It's his type of song. He's got all the jewelry to go with it. I think it's kind of perfect.
There is. I like the manager's rabbit hole that JB's gone down, because you could extend this and you could go for football players that actually play musical instruments as well as sing. So you could form a band. You could have Slaven Bilic, who plays the guitar. You could have Petr Cech doing the percussion on the drums. Nobby Solano, the Peruvian, plays the trumpet. And you can complete the band by having Dion Dublin playing the tube.
Well remembered. Oh, brilliant.
Oh, excellent link. Yeah. Love that.
That is absolutely fantastic. I love that. The singing, of course, wasn't Terry Venables' only extracurricular skill in that fashion. So it still seems extraordinary to me that he co-wrote the TV series Hazel, which is quite interesting. He wrote I think he wrote the books, and then also wrote around for 2 seasons on Thames, and I think it was kind of almost like a precursor to Minder. I think it was a similar sort of concept, maybe not quite as successful as, perhaps maybe arguably not as well written, who knows. But it's an extraordinary thing for him to have done in amongst this. And he just seems to be someone who just try almost anything.
Yeah, he did it under a pseudonym as well, didn't he? I think he kind of, because I think he wanted to be taken serious, so he didn't use his name. I think was it PB Yule
or something.
Yule, yeah.
I'm sure there must be some.
Yeah.
There's something behind it. There must be, but I couldn't figure it out.
He's a man of many talents, and I know you've had you probably still have it, that obsession with Billy Hamilton's board game that you've referenced on these things. I think more than once actually. But Venables, Venables himself, he also collaborated and created a board game called The Manager.
Absolutely right.
Did anyone get to play it?
No, but I do remember it. I do remember him doing it, but I never played it. Anybody play it?
I had a board game when I was younger that kind of was something similar to that, but my memory's too vague. I kind of feel I did play it because I was into board games and anything football related, but I can't confirm that. So I think there's a small chance I did play it, but I'd have had absolutely no idea that it was Terry Venables who was responsible for it. It would have just been another Christmas present that I would have just used.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because he does, he's a ex-professional footballer, played for England, played for some top teams as a top manager, and that's still not enough for him, is it? He's got to do board games. He's got to write TV series. He wants to own a football club. He wants to be a consultant. He wants to do this, that, and the other. And invariably, and certainly the stuff I looked up, unfortunately, it all kind of never really works out for him, does it? All of the business ventures don't really work out for him, and it's really the football. But he always wants to be something slightly different, which I just find a bit interesting in many ways.
He is, of course, not the only literary English football manager. Here we have to mention once again the brilliant Steve Bruce and his trilogy of detective novels under the detective Steve Barnes, not drastically different, and his three book Sweeper, Striker, and Defender. There's a whole world you can dive in. I think the world of trying to track these books down has become more of a detective mystery than the actual mysteries in the book. And to what extent Steve Bruce wrote these, there seems to be some kind of, without going too far down them, the covers are brilliant because just feature dead footballers on the blood in the dressing rooms. And also, I was reading this one glorious bit which mentioned that in one of the books, I think Sweeper. So this is in an excellent BBC article by Kieran McCauley from a while ago. He says a series highlight is when Steve Bruce manages to reference his well-known lack of international recognition. So when British Secret Service agents kidnap Steve Barnes, one of 4 kidnappings in the book, and ask him to go undercover, he refuses. He tells them, "My country never wanted me." His reasoning for not helping counter-terrorism is not that he lacks training or expertise, that he's a middle-aged football manager, it's that he never got an international cap.
He's driven by bitterness.
All good. Sadly, no more Steve Bruce novels to come. But there we go. So Terry Venables, to get back to more salient things, Terry Venables, we now are in his second season at Barcelona, and he is riding high. Hopes are high. They don't do a lot in the transfer market, do they? There's not much by way of strengthening that squad, is there?
I don't think anyone comes in. From what I can tell, I don't think any star names come in to bolster and strengthen the Barcelona team that, of course, will be competing in the European Cup for the first time in 11 years. And at this point in the history of Barcelona, they'd never won it.
Yes, and it's the European Cup that comes to dominate this season, isn't it? So the league, their kind of league form kind of tails off a little bit. They don't retain the title or anything. And the European Cup becomes the sort of primary focus, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure for Venables that would have been the case, but the league start is awful. They get off to an awful start in the league. I think they win one of their first 5 or 6 games, I think it is. So it really takes a while for them to get back into the groove of being in La Liga. But the European Cup, as we know, is a different competition in the 1980s. It's a smaller competition. There are no group phases. They just go through a round system where they play Sparta Prague in September.
From what I can see, probably the big game in that cup run is the semi-final.
That's right, Nick. They play Gothenburg, don't they? And it's one of those historic nights where they lose the away game 3-0. And there's a lovely piece, isn't it, where Venables does a bit of tactical genius as it transpires, because eventually they get through. But it's one of those ones where at the time, as a fan, you would be questioning it. But they're 3-0 down, and he puts on a centre back, doesn't he? When they're 3-0 down, rather than put their striker on, who's insanely incensed by it, furious. But they hang on. They hang on to the 3-0 defeat.
They sit on the 3-0 defeat.
and then remarkably turn it around in the second leg where they play. And Jamie, help me out here, because I can't remember the name of the striker that they bring on in that semi-final.
It's an Alonso, isn't it?
It's Pichi Alonso.
I think you're right.
It's Pichi Alonso. They bring on. Yeah. We should point out in the quarterfinals, they do knock out the European Cup holders, Juventus, which is a big scalp. Juve
Would
were...
Platini was that Platini's Juventus?
Yes, so Juventus had won it the previous season, but it can easily be forgotten about because it was the Heysel disaster when they did win that particular version. So they are the defending champions of Barcelona, do knock them out in the quarterfinals. But yeah, then they go to play Steaua Bucharest in the final in Seville, where Steaua Bucharest, being a Romanian team, a communist state or communist country at that particular moment, you're not allowed to leave the country. So Steaua Bucharest don't have any fans. So Barcelona pretty much have the whole of the stadium cheering them on. And they managed to play out one of the most dire game of football I think there's ever been. Is that right, Graham?
I think there's definitely a thought, really, that Barcelona probably think they have, that the hard work is done. So Steaua Bucharest are a decent side. They've obviously done well to get there, but especially if you've got Juventus out and everything is sort of building to winning this European Cup, and it being in Seville, obviously makes a big difference. But the game isn't going well at all. And 0-0, about 84 minutes in, Eltel makes a substitution, which well, maybe our man Burnt doesn't take as well as he might do.
Poor old Bernd. Yeah, he gets hooked, doesn't he, on the 85th minute? And by all accounts, he storms down the tunnel and straight out of the stadium in a huge, petulant strop. He just walks away from a European Cup final. It's insane, really. Poor old Bernd walks
and
off.
it is a. I mean, we've lauded Terry Venables' tactical genius through this, but there is an element to which, he's a good player, whether he's having a good game or a bad game. He is also quite good at penalties. That is one of the other thoughts about this, that Bernd Schuster was quite a good penalty taker. And given what is to happen in penalties, it was, well, I mean, Jamie, you've South Coast, Jamie, you've watched this again quite recently. It's a special. It's
mad. I mean, well, Barcelona don't score any of their penalties, and which is quite remarkable. There's a couple of dreadful penalties, but there's also a couple of well hit ones that and again you covered these guys before in the past, but Helmut Duckerdam, which I love the name, he makes a couple of blinding saves to him as well, and it is one of the lowest scoring penalty shootouts, I think, of all time, isn't it? Because Steaua Bucharest win 2-0, Barcelona don't score any, and it's an absolute damp squib of a game for Barcelona, who are playing, as you said, Jamie, in front of pretty much an entire Barcelona fan base in Seville. The sad thing in many ways, isn't it, that by all accounts, this kind of this sucks the joy out of it all for everybody. This was everything that they wanted. This was everything they hoped and believed. They, as you said earlier, Jamie, they'd have probably built a statue of Terry Venables if he'd have managed to get that over the line, winning the league title and winning European Cup for the first time, and they're not able to do it, and it just leaves a kind of a terrible feeling of discontent, and they're back to that old culture of, oh, it's always us, we're unlucky, we're the victims, and it gently starts to spiral down in that way after that, which is it's such a shame, isn't it? Because I start to look at Venables' broader managerial career, and there's a very noticeable semi-final he loses again on penalties a few years later, and it's kind of that's those sliding door moments with Venables where he could have been revered as an amazing coach who created history at both club and country for Barcelona and England, and yet a couple of penalty shootouts is the difference between that, isn't it? And it's kind of sad in a way, but yeah, it's a real sliding doors moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I wonder if Terry Venables hadn't spread himself so thinly by doing the other things that we've mentioned, the screenplays, the books, the singing, the board games, and whether he was able to just channel his energy and his focus onto football, whether he would have been a more successful manager, because he is the bridesmaid on this particular season, they come second in the league to Real Madrid, they come second in the cup, they come second in the European Cup. I mean, it's an unwanted treble, isn't it, really, in terms of what it is? Mm-hmm. And he could have been, along with Jim Bellamy, the first English manager to win a league title for Barcelona. He could have been, would have been the last English manager to win the European Cup with Barcelona, and their first. So you're right. I think he would have been lauded as an absolute genius, regardless of whatever happened in the following seasons, because he would have captured that first European Cup for Barcelona. But there was no sight of this, really. I mean, I think they did go into this game feeling everything was in their favour, and it probably only took, if they'd have got one goal, I think that would have been enough. I don't think there would have been any response from Steaua, and we've covered that previously when we did Steaua Bucharest. But in the semi-final that you referenced, Jamie, where Venables does make a tactical genius decision by bringing in the centre-back and securing up 3-0 because he believed that, 3-0, they could get it back, 4-0, they ain't getting it back. And Peachy goes on, he gets his hat-trick, and that goes to penalty kicks. And Barcelona storm it.
Yeah,
they storm it on penalty kicks against Gothenburg.
Yeah, they actually score those ones. Although, interestingly, Bernd Schuster doesn't take one in that one either. So either he's been subbed off, or my fact about Bernd Schuster being an excellent penalty taker, which no one else has heard of, is maybe not a fact. This is the end of the year. I mean, Venables is there for a whole nother season. And actually, they regroup, don't they? Regroup, and they do bring in players, and probably most noticeably, of course, Gary Lineker and Mark Hughes. And I sort of remember this because I think I remember this is 86, isn't it? So Lineker's scored absolute hatful of goals. And I remember that during that World Cup, there was the whole speculation as to whether Barcelona were going to sign him or not. I think Venables was doing the BBC commentary at that station. They would always kind of ask him in between, are you signing him? And there'd be the glint in his eye about it, and he knew. But that did look as though that was tailor-made. And actually, Lineker does well for Barcelona, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's a massive signing. Golden Boot winner. Lineker is at the height of his game. He's an absolute world-class player at this particular point. Poacher, will be a bit more than a poacher, that's in fairness. But yeah, he goes on and scores, I think gets over 20 goals in his first season in Spain. I mean, he starts off with, I think, is it 3 or 4 goals against Real Madrid in his first game? And it was a good season for Barcelona. They were top for quite some time. Yeah, so La Liga in the 86-87 season, which turns out to be Gary Lineker's first season in Spain, as well as Mark Hughes, and Venables' final season, as it transpires, with Barcelona. Barcelona finished 1 point behind Real Madrid, which is, they're still runners-up. It's still not what the Barcelona fans want. But the league season isn't over. So what we've decided to do is to break the league into 3 pools of 6. The top 6 teams will go into a final playoff. They retain their points, but they'll play the other 5 teams in that pool twice, home and away. So they end up playing 44 games. They do this at the bottom as well. So the bottom 6 teams do the same. And for what reason, I don't really understand. They do it with the middle 6 teams as well, where you can't win the league, you can't get relegated, you can't get into Europe.
You can finish 7th.
It does feel quite a bizarre experiment. And Barcelona go into that and they aren't able to recapture the points they need. They actually end up losing the league by 3 points to Real Madrid. So the order of the top 2 is maintained. Yeah, it really doesn't make a great deal of sense, this format.
Yeah. Oh, enough about that. What about who came 7th?
And do you know what, as well? Atletico Madrid came 7th in the real league. So Atletico Madrid finish on 47 points and are technically 7th in the intermediate group, that is called. But Sporting Gijon, who finished 4th in the overall championship group, have 45 points. So both Atletico Madrid and Real Sociedad would have finished above them had they merged the points. So it really is a bizarre way to finish the season, where you've got a relegation group, a championship group, and an intermediate group that probably no one gives a shit about.
And I know we can't lose too much time on this. Is 7th the highest that Atletico can then finish? Or they've actually got more points than the team who finished 5th or 6th? But of course they got more points because the team who finished 5th and 6th are playing the top 4 twice.
Yeah.
Whereas Atletico Madrid are playing all these middle-of-the-road teams. A couple of them just somehow are just happy to have managed to make their way out of the bottom 6. I'm surprised the system didn't take off.
Yeah, and you won't be surprised to hear that it didn't. And the following season, it was back to normal. And the only difference was that the league was expanded.
Worth noting, of course, Gary Lineker, massive success at Barcelona. Mark Hughes, massively not.
This didn't work out for him. And he was a huge star at the time, wasn't he? I mean, Jamie, you can speak to this better than I can, being a Man United fan, and but he was, wasn't he? There was huge excitement. But I always remember reading somewhere that Lineker embraced the culture and he embraced the language, didn't he? And he kind of he kind of bought into everything. Whereas I believe Mark Hughes just didn't do that and just never really was able to fit in.
I think for Mark Hughes, it was like playing in a foreign country, so he just didn't adapt to it. You can understand why Venables is thinking, I could make this work. I've got Hughes that can kind of drift into those spaces as a number 10, and I've got Lineker who's just going to stay up there as a number 9. So I kind of get the idea of it. But yeah, it didn't work out for Mark Hughes, unfortunately. And I think he was loaned out to Bayern Munich, and then before you know it, he was back at Manchester United.
Yes, all quite good stuff. So this is really where the Terry Venables story in Spain ends. He's heads back to Tottenham at this stage, and that feels like given the conversation we're probably now going to have about whether Terry Venables is, in fact, a brilliant manager or a serial underachiever, is there an argument that Tottenham is the right place for him?
I think before we answer that question, and it's a brilliant question, so let's give pause to thought while we just giggle away. I think the Venables story ends in the UEFA Cup quarterfinals. They go out to Dundee United, who win both home and away matches against FC Barcelona.
Is there some strange fact about that as well, or have I made that up? They're the only team to have beaten Barcelona in both legs or something, or
they're the only team, I think, in the history of the game that have a 100% record against Barcelona. They've played Barcelona 4 times and they've won all 4 football matches.
4 times?
4 times, wow. And they've won all 4 football matches. Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Dundee United, what a boast.
I like the idea that Barcelona fans are talking about Dundee. Oh, we never win against Dundee United. That really is something special. Yes, we will be doing Dundee United in, hopefully next week. But if not next week, it'll be the week after. But we think it's going to be next week. So yes, so Terry Venables goes back to England and into Tottenham. And I suppose it's Terry Venables, a lot of his career achievements are around the style and the panache and the way he did things, rather than necessarily the weight of honours that he won. Is that fair? I mean, South Coast Jamie, I think you'd seen some arguments and discussions about this.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Some of my formative footballing life was watching Terry Venables teams. And there's 2 sides, isn't there, here? Because you get the likes of Gary Lineker, who considered Venables to be the best English coach we've had, and likened him to Pep Guardiola, sort of saying he was charming, charismatic, witty, but he was also tough, and that's what you needed to be. He understood football. He had an incredible football brain. So that's sort of the one side of it. You've also got, I read some lovely stuff, Alan Shearer's talking this very similar thing, how tactically brilliant he was. Gary Neville says the same things. And then you've got, I think you can't say that without sort of looking at some of the other side here. The journalist Bill Burrows in The Observer in 2004 actually wrote, questioned why Venables, who has won so little and failed at so much, was considered by his peers to be synonymous with success. Burrows carries on by saying he lost a couple of big games on penalties and even led Spurs to 3rd in the league. But in truth, his record isn't good enough, certainly when compared to the best managers such as Brian Clough. Venables' career arguably promised more than it delivered. And I think there's a real element of truth about that. And it's a little bit sad in some ways, when the talent he had and the teams he managed, that he didn't. And again, it's very fine margins, as we've spoken about. It's a penalty here or a penalty there, and he's won a European Cup and he's possibly won a Euros. But it's a shame in many ways that's we're sort of left like that. A great manager, a great man by all accounts, not necessarily a great businessman or a book writer or a script writer, but in the footballing sense was out there, was ahead of his time.
His record isn't glorious. I mean, if you look at major honours, we've got La Liga that he's won with Barcelona and an FA Cup that he does win with Tottenham. there's a lot of glory that surrounds him, but there's not a lot of glory in terms of titles.
Venables actually wins the same number of Spanish honours, about the exact same number of Spanish honours as another British manager of that same era, as John Toshak, who wins a La Liga with Real Madrid and Copa del Rey with Real Sociedad, I think.
Yeah, Real Sociedad.
Yes, we should get to... Oh, well, we should probably... Barcelona, how quickly does it take them to... can he lay a claim to having set in motion what Barcelona are to become, Jamie?
Yeah, I think you could spin it that way. He's definitely... We talked about the top of this style of play with the pressing game. And I think Guardiola's been watching, obviously, a young, impressionable Guardiola. And I think the culture of the team is changing, but it only really changes when Johan Cruyff arrives. They have a few managers after Venables that don't really do anything. It changes quite regularly. Cruyff comes along, and then from 1990 to 91, they win 4 championships in a row, and they also finally win the European Cup when they beat Sampdoria at Wembley on a balmy May evening in London.
So we should get to ranking this side. As a reminder, we have 5 categories of greatness, from all-time greats to the top. We have through greats as our second top category, touch greatness, edge greatness below that, and a blinkered great. Jamie, Rooney, where do you want to put this team?
Well, it's Barcelona, so you think you're immediately going to go to the top group, but that's not going to happen. I don't even think they're in the second tier, to be honest. I think it's a Barcelona that's almost been erased from their history. Whilst doing the research for this one, I watched a few the history of Barcelona YouTube videos. Some of them that were 60, 90 minutes long. Some were like 10, 15 minutes long. There's a half a dozen I watched. They just go from Cruyff the player in the 70s to Cruyff the manager in the 90s. It's almost like they don't want to talk about what happened in the 1980s. And they're all consistently like that. So even Barcelona don't regard this team noteworthy, unfortunately. But having said that, the first league title in 11 years, a series of runners-up in the second season, most notably in the European Cup, when I think that is probably a missed opportunity for Barcelona and Venables, and I think that is the moment where it turns south for Venables. So I'll start us in a touch of greatness, tier 3, because I do feel there is a touch of greatness, but equally, you could probably argue there's an edge of greatness to this as well by not winning that European Cup.
South Coast, Jamie, what's your sort of feeling for this side?
I went down the edge of greatness route, actually, for me. It's the pain of losing that European Cup final. They should have done that, and they didn't. And so that, as I say, it was a bit of a death nail in Venables' career that took a year to sort of filter its way out. But that was the. But then you flip it around the other way, and as you say, there's an argument to say that he laid at least the foundation stones that Cruyff was able to pick up a few years later and started to change the culture of the club and what they were doing. I think if we're rating the team, I have to go edge of greatness. I think, however, though, it's almost worth saying a huge amount of affection for Terry Venables as a guy and a coach. And I think the final sort of thing I wanted to say really was that he's remembered very fondly in Spanish football, and it kind of go full circle, wasn't it? He'd get up and do the singing. He engaged the fans and the players who play for him all seem to love him. So I think the team itself, edge of greatness for me.
Venables at Barcelona was such a brilliant story for English football, British football. You created El Tel. It created this. It was still pretty unusual for football managers to go over there and do well. And his immediate impact is is brilliant, isn't it? And at that level, you could have made the case for, I think, touch of greatness. I'm with you, Jamie, that everything is coloured by losing that European Cup final, and the whole legacy gets there. And actually, won La Liga, albeit the first for over a decade, over a three-year campaign, isn't that special, I don't think. I was wavering between the two, and we had, there was a choice to be made, wasn't there? When he took over and Diego Maradona was sold, he had the choice between signing Steve Hu or Hugo Sanchez. Now, we're all agreed he bought, Steve Archibald was a great signing, and he was, because they signed him, he scores goals, he's popular, he's good there, and he goes and wins the title in the first year. And I'm looking through Steve Archibald's honours, and he's got 1985 La Liga with Barcelona, 1986 the Copa de Liga, Barcelona, 1985 the Rouse Cup with Scotland. He's genuinely in there, and that's it for him. And then if we look at Hugo Sanchez honours around that same La Liga 1985-86, La Liga 86-87, La Liga 87-88, La Liga 88-89, La Liga 89-90. Now, if you're being a cruel man, you might think, was Steve Archibald the right signing? Well, Hugo Sanchez did, as it turned out to be quite a good signing. And in that context, I think we have to say El Tel's Barcelona, edge of greatness.
So, Steve Archibald, I thought I'd leave this to the end rather than disrupt our flow. I have a fact that you're going to love.
Okay.
Steve Archibald appeared in 1982 in the same episode of Top of the Pops. He was with the Scottish team and B.A. Robinson, I have a dream, which you've referenced before.
Yeah.
And then he also appeared. He also appeared on the same episode with Chaz and Dave doing Tottenham, because Tottenham were in the FA Cup final playing Terry Venables, QPR.
So Steve Archibald is a double appearance on Top of the Pops.
Same episode, not a double appearance. He was in the same episode.
There cannot be anybody else who's done that. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. I'm just thinking, if you two had a song in the charts and it was the same time as Band Aid, then you could claim Bono appeared on the. You might be able to get away with it that way. But a footballer, which footballer appeared on an episode of Top of the Pops in two different bands? It's a great one. Oh, magnificent.
Yeah, it's a nugget.
As you said, the Band Aid stuff there must be someone who turned up in Band Aid who must have had a hit at that same time. But Steve Archibald, of all people, who, as far as I know, didn't have a starring role in either of those. He wasn't a fantastic lyricist in either of those. Or more formally, we should thank South Coast Jamie for breaking out of the South Coast and making it all the way to sunny Barcelona. Thank you for joining us again.
Always a great pleasure to be here, chaps. Always fun. Thank you.
And regular Jamie, thank you for that Steve Archibald fact. That is right up there, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm going to use it again at some point. It's too good not to let it go once, I'm afraid. Or you can use it. It's yours to use.
Excellent, great stuff. So yes, we will be back hopefully next week. Well, we will definitely be back next week. But next week, we are hoping to be doing Dundee United. We also have the brilliant Greece European Championship winners, and I think we may have the fantastic Milk Cup winners from 1986 coming up. Join us again for those in the next few weeks. Till then, that's it from us.